finished my first draft of the book that I've been writing this year, which has been one hell of an arduous task. So yeah, I'm happy. I feel like I can relax and get into Christmas mode now and not feel guilty. And yeah.
I'm just going to roll straight into asking you about that then, because Dear Future Historians was so bold, and I think it made you understand the inner workings of Shikari and yourself a little greater. With that as a canvas to launch off of, like, how is it going to be a continuation of that? Is it going to be different to that? Like, how has it been with a follow-up to that book?
Well, it was going to be a follow-up to it. It was just going to be the same thing, just like a little explanatory essay for each song, detailing the inspirations and the motivations behind the lyrics. And then because of the way this year's gone and the fact that we've all been living quite sort of reclusive, solitary lives anyway, I found myself just diving a lot deeper. So I haven't written any music this year. I haven't been able to, weirdly. But luckily I've had this other creative outlet being the book, and I found that I found this outlet was special because I can go into so much detail, obviously. Anyone can make a sort of a political track and try and make a point in a 3-4 minute, basically a pop song. But like, you can only say so much, and I feel like this has enabled me to go in. And I have, like, so this first draft's like 80,000 words, so it's an actual book now. It's like the accompanying like literature for the album, basically.
What's fascinating about that is when you were doing the press run for Nothing Is True and Everything Is Possible, a lot of the things that were spoken about was you created the album when you were in a positive headspace. So writing an 80,000 word book in 2020, how do those two things go together, or?
I don't know what headspace I'm in anymore. Like, I usually say that, I'm not an optimist or a pessimist. I try and find a realistic middle ground all the time. But like, it's so hard to find reality now, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
as what a lot of the album's about. Like, just clinging on to truth is like a white knuckle ride, isn't it? Like, so yeah, I don't know. It's I suppose that this book is it's such a deep analysis of like where we are. It rides the album. The album is like it's kind of transport throughout the book, but like essentially it's like an analysis of the world that the album was written in, and because it's just so ridiculous that we wrote an album so if one half's about our post-truth world, the other half is about how our possibilities have become so great, and they've like the things that we never thought could happen have happened or are going to happen, and yeah, so that I think the fact that the album came out literally during a global pandemic, when we made an album about like existential threats, essentially, was just like, okay, well, we need to like say more about this, because there's so much to say. So like, yeah, as I say, luckily with the book you can go to an extra level of detail.
Have you found your perspective changing a lot in 2020? Because as you were kind of alluding to there, it's been a roller coaster, both mentally and in terms of the fucking world just paying attention this year. How have you found being on that roller coaster, and how's it affected the book?
I mean, the thing is that what's happened this year, a lot of it comes down to things that we've been talking about for years. Like, even before the song Anaesthetist, we were talking about the perils of privatizing healthcare and the perils of putting profit over people, very simply. And we've seen that play out in a very national and tragic way. The fact that we were so unprepared. So I guess it was just analysing those various events that have happened and kind of saying, yeah, we've talked about this, but now now I have a chance to go into it a little more. But yeah, my year has been very, very odd, as I'm sure anyone's has been. But my life has completely changed and literally become like this reclusive author, just slaving with my quill. Yeah, it's been weird, but I'm glad basically that I had this thing to concentrate on, this thing that I could do whilst living a more solitary life off of course.
When you've put together a record like Nothing's True and Everything's Possible, do you feel like its lifespan has been affected by 2020? Because such acclaim was thrown its way when it's come out, but it's always hard to keep that momentum going when people are not having it played to them because touring's fucked. Like, how do you feel 2020 has affected the lifespan of the record, if at all?
Well, yeah, it's like, it's taken a fuel canister out of the ship of the album. It's just like kind of chugging along still, but the fact that we haven't been able to play it live anywhere and sort of build on the music that was recorded, see how it turns out live, like see how it sounds, see how the audience reacts to it, and that's the super depressing thing, is like we still don't know what these songs are. They're still these like sort of protected like animals that are just caged and we haven't let them out yet. So it's like the songs are recorded, but we don't know what they'll turn into live. So I still, it feels like they're just kind of penned in at the moment and just like waiting, as we all are. Like,
for real. So I've got to say, Rou, like some bands, it surprised me that they haven't gone all in on the live streaming thing. And having been there at Alexandra Palace and still be raving about quadraphonic sound and all these kind of things, have you explored the possibility of doing a Bells and Whistles live stream?
Not at all, no.
Not interested? No.
Basically, it's a short answer. I mean, I think, well, first of all, like, we're privileged not to have to do it, literally to be able to survive. Although, give us another 6 months if we still can't tour, then we've
always wanted to do this quadraphonic stream. What are you talking about?
But I think, when we've discussed it as a band, we're just not. I don't know. I can't get as excited about them as I hope other people are, because they, some of them have been brilliant. They've been like amazing works of art, and like, incredible like narratives and cinematography and effects, and but I think we're just sort of still planning to wait it out, because there's just so much that you can't capture, and I also, there's just still something that's just deep within me that just, when there's like a million live videos of us online, like making people pay for one, it just doesn't seem right. Basically. And I mean, we barely played the new stuff in a room together. We had like some practices that sort of just before the first lockdown, and played like a couple of them, and we're getting all excited, and then the world went to shit. So if we even did record ourselves playing in a venue and put it out as a live stream, it wouldn't be very good, to be honest, because we just haven't been playing together.
I hear you. Right, so with this being a kind of album of the year roundup, when it comes to this particular record in your back catalogue, I think it's the best thing you've done. As someone that's been a fan since the start, I think that this is the statement artistically for Shikari. What do you
Thanks.
think? What do you think it does that no other Shikari record does?
I think it's probably. I mean, it's just more vast for one. I mean, we usually say that like musical agility is like the thing we really pride ourselves on and constantly push ourselves on. And there were just lots of firsts for this album, and I think you can hear that. So it was the first time I'd ever written a piece for an orchestra. Is the obvious thing, and having to produce an album completely by myself is the first time I've done that. I mean, I've co-produced in the past, but yeah, that was the first there. So that there was all these. The way we recorded drums was like very different to anything before. So there basically isn't any samples on the album. Look, this is always hard to explain for someone that has no sort of basis in music production, like for the audience listening. But like almost all the records you all listen to and love are full of drum samples. I.e., the drums weren't hit there by the drums in the studio. They're things that were pasted over that sound better, and that's fine. And we've done that before, and I'm not against that. There's nothing wrong with that. But we set ourselves out a plan on this record to record all our drums ourselves, and it just basically made it a lot harder for ourselves. But I think there was so much that came out of that, so many perks. So yeah, it was just a real kind of step forward and pushing ourselves in terms of an album that we haven't done before. So hopefully that comes across in the record, the ambition of it, the energy, the passion. I mean, there was certainly more hours into that record than there's been in any other. It really was. I didn't really have any life outside of it. I lived that record for a year, so it was it was a big scale project.
So, did you enjoy that extra? I mean, I don't want to say pressure, but the workload. Like, it's one thing to be part of a creative hub of a band. That takes it out of a band when it's a band like Enter Shikari and the ambition is vast anyway. But to add being producer on top of that, did you lose your fucking mind, or did you thrive on that? Like, what was that situation like? Being the person with that on their shoulders for a Shikari record, because you're a passionate band. I mean, internally amongst the people, no one is there to just shit out an alright album so they can go out on tour in Enter Shikari. So playing the kind of conductor for all of that, how was that?
I think like all of the above. There are definitely moments where I like questions. As with most thinking people, like the imposter syndrome crept up every now and then. It's something that I've wanted to do for ages, like produce an album by myself, because there's so many things that we miss in all sorts of ways. I mean, one, just like a social anxiety thing, like if I'm not the one at the computer, I'll have an idea and I'll start thinking about it in order to then suggest it to the producer. Whereas if I'm the producer, I don't have to think about it, I just do it and try it out, and experiment.
Yeah.
So there's so much that we've actually missed, I think. So yeah, just being in the chair, it was fucking exhausting. It was mad, but there was a lot that happened that wouldn't have happened. I think just having like one core like creative space for the ideas to come out of and flow through just made the album so much better. Like I sort of learned my production in drum and bass and kind of house, I suppose, and dubstep going back like a decade. So for me, production is really just part of the creative process. It's like it's something we've always been involved in, but yeah, taking it on fully was great because there was stuff that we did that we'd never had the chance to do before. So yeah, cool.
Would you produce for other bands now, Rou, or is this I'll just stick to Enter Shikari, thanks?
No, I think I'd like. Yeah, I mean, I've written for other bands, and I did like a lot of pop writing over the last few years, which was interesting. But like, I've never, like sat down and taken on like a band's album as a producer. But I think it's something I'd like to do. It's just whether Usually I'm like too much of a control freak, but I think I've learned to quell that instinct, like purely through the group writing stuff that I've done. So yeah, no, I'd love to.
And so you mentioned the orchestration on the record, and one of the things that I find most fascinating about the album is that on the one hand, it's made on these instruments that have been around for fucking ever, right? And these grand things that could have come from, you literally, on a musical canvas front, it could have come from like 80 years ago, versus the hyper-modern approach of Enter Shikari. Was the challenge, to a certain extent, taking those two things and making them palatable? Because it's okay to drag something from the far end of one side and the far end of another, but often when those things are melded, that distance shows. Was the challenge with this record making something that was palatable to both principles?
That's always an interesting one to think about, because like music now is, we're a long way from the years where we were starting, where everything was still very like genre-fied and segregated.
Yeah.
Now songs are brought out and they have like, they go from one genre to the other in a millisecond. So I think the landscape has changed a lot. So more often I'm sort of thinking, well, it's not my job to make it palatable. It's the audience's job to catch up. Do you know what I mean?
Gotcha. Right. I love that.
It's fucking like cocksure or an arrogant thing to say, but like sometimes I think as an artist, like as a proper artist, you have to think about, okay, well, how palatable do we want to make it? Yeah, we want to make it work as a story, as a narrative. We want to make things fit, and yeah, also we want to study the history and the techniques of the things we're using. Like, I don't like just being inspired by something and then just like throwing in some like carbon copy pastiche of something I've heard. Like, I like to learn about whatever that genre is, where it came from, what it means, like what they're trying to get across. And I think as long as we stand by those two principles, then yeah, as long as it has a narrative and fits like a sonic narrative as well. It sounds like a fucking wanky phrase, but I think that's important. Yeah, and as long as we sort of treat the things we're influenced by with kind of a respect, I think, then that's all we're sort of worried about. I think I'm lucky as well that because I was brought up on so many different styles of music, and I've been like, my life's been saturated with all different styles since I was as young as I can remember. Therefore, I think there's a certain degree of like, there's something innate in me that sort of understands how to weave through, these like musical landscapes and make them make sense. So even though I'm sort of playing it down, making light of it and saying that, yeah, it's the audience that has to catch up, I think there's probably something within us that is quite sort of skilled at that, but without really appreciating it or knowing it or something. Yeah, just through practice, really.
It's interesting to me because so much of the band that I compare Enter Shikari to culturally and historically is The Clash, because it doesn't have that, like, it was the same sort of thing with no boundaries to where they would go musically for their time, but also being a working class political voice. And something that I admire about this record in particular, it's always been part of Shikari's fabric, but I think it's really, really particularly brilliant on this record, is the line between talking to the people on the street, the people that listen to this music, the people that come to shows, and the people that this can appeal to, with a level of street smart and intelligence. Like, it doesn't ever come off pompous, which is how that political stuff can go if you go too far in one direction. And it's not dumb either. It's not, hey, this is bad, eh? like,
I think we have fallen into both of those traps in our
yeah.
career probably, but that's I probably I definitely pay way more attention to that than I do making things fit musically. Making sure that we've got the message right and it hits to as many people as possible. Because as you say, it's hard. There's like, we all have varying degrees of experience in the world in the different things that we're talking about. So it's like trying to find a way of expressing ideas without as you say, making them trite and making them overblown is the thing that we concentrate on the most probably.
Final question then. With this album being such a big creative standing point for Shikari, in my opinion, Britain's an interesting place at the moment. Culturally, I mean, I wouldn't describe it as interesting, but like musically, from where you've come from with yourselves, Architects, Bring Me the Horizon, the band from that particular class, all thriving in different ways. I wondered how much attention you paid or what you thought of bands that are coming through currently in the UK. Because it feels like, from over the other side of the Atlantic, it feels like there's a lot of cool and great and interesting music coming out of the scene that you kind of came from as well back there. I just wondered if that was the sort of thing that was on your radar, or if because you are always so consumed with your own work, if that's something that doesn't even bleep on your radar.
I think this year I've been awful. I mean, I haven't listened to music really this year. As I say, like, I haven't created anything, and I've been so heads down in this project that I have to say that I hold my hand up. I'm just completely ignorant to what's going on at the moment. I certainly know that it's harder, I think, for bands to come in, and especially there seems to be like that sort of, there's definitely a ceiling where, like, even over the sort of last 5 years, where bands can get to a certain stage, but like getting, the next rung on the ladder is becoming so difficult because there's so little, even basic things like venues. Venues are shutting down up and down the country, and there's all the sort of indie touring circuits have kind of dissolved to a certain extent. All I know is that it's tough, and the stuff that I do hear that it excites me is just as exciting as back in 2004 or whatever. So when I do get back into not being such a blinkered person, which should happen now really as I hopefully we'll feel that excitement again from the stuff. Oh, you'll have to hit me up with who I need to check out.
Absolutely, I will do, always. All right, one more, just because I've totally forgot to ask. The record and how it was created versus the world that it's come into. Has it changed your perception of Nothing Is True and Everything Is Possible? Because as a title, you mentioned the duality earlier on. It's easy to be a member of the media and take what has happened to information, and Nothing Is True and Everything Is Possible being a kind of snarky slight on that kind of Fox Newsy style, Nothing Is True and Everything Is Possible, but also that we are limitless in what we can achieve is the duality of how that title can be taken. Is that a plus point, being released into a world where so many of us are flip-flopping from optimism to pessimism on a hourly basis?
It's so disorientating, isn't it? Like,
yep.
One thing, it's not quite positivity or optimism, but it's a sort of exciting. One thing I go into the book, and it's basically what Great Unknown is about, the first track on the album. We are all alive at the most pivotal point in our species' lifespan. So all intelligent creatures in the universe, if there are any, which I'm sure there are, they all get to one point where they they discover the ability to destroy themselves. And over the last sort of century, and going forward, even more interestingly, we've discovered that. We've discovered that through nuclear weapons. We've discovered that through changing our own planet through climate change. As people dub it, the Anthropocene, and also with AI. I mean, you can do hours and hours just talking about AI.
Yeah.
So this point is like so fascinating because basically, this isn't me being like a doomsday cultist or like trying to predict everything, but basically, that if we really simplify it, there are just two paths. One, we like overcome our kind of mental kind of what would you call it? Our mental capacity, our intelligence, our morality is kind of lagging behind our technical ability, our technology. So yeah, we either work that side of us catches up, our cerebral side, our kindness, our ability to think as a species, as one, catches up, or it doesn't, and we're completely fucked. Like those are literally the two paths. And so that's what I find fascinating, because you can, if you're able to divert around the intense negative bias of the news. So we're pummeled every day by negative news because that's what sells. If it bleeds, it leads. We all know.
It's easier to get people to hate something than it is to get them to love something, and the media know it, mate.
Yeah. So yeah, if we're able to kind of avert all of that business, there's so much to be positive about. Like human ingenuity is utterly incredible. Even just like the last few weeks, we've had amazing scientific discoveries in Israel, where they're talking about reversing the aging process. We've had all these developments in like climate change and how we like carbon capture and all this madness. So if you're able to sidestep the hostility and the division in society and the kind of real nastiness, there's a lot to be positive about. And I sort of also kind of weirdly feel grateful to be alive at this point.
Yeah, big time.
It's fucking exhilarating. Which, of course, at the same time, it's utterly exhausting, and it can be, it can drive you mad with anxiety and depression and all sorts of other mental health things. But at the same time, it's certainly a privilege to be alive at this point, and that's why, we're doing all we can to try and take us down that path that doesn't lead to complete and utter destruction.
And on that bombshell, here's to a better 2021 and the future in general. Rou, thanks so much for taking your time as always, man. Good luck with the end of the book, and we look for. So that's a 2021. We're going to get the book.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, first start of that.
Perfect. Look forward to reading it again, man. Take care. See you soon.
Take it easy.
Cheers, mate. Bye.